All right, asshole. You just fucked yourself.
Hello, my name is Zachary Cush, and you're about to find out why I love Fallout New Vegas. The fact that Fallout New Vegas exists at all is a miracle. The fact that it both exists and is great is nothing short of beatific. Fallout New Vegas is one of those rare pieces of fiction which feels like a human triumph. Everything happened that needed to happen in order to make it the best version of itself possible. It offers a unique, thought-provoking, and genuinely intriguing holistic experience. It represents the progenitor of a genre unto itself. Seriously, the game feels like the kind of game people will make in the 2060s, when entire generations have collectively crafted enough discursive knowledge to teach everybody how to love video games. Therefore, I officially declare Fallout New Vegas the Citizen Kane of video games. It is not the video game which will awaken to the world the joy and beauty of video games as a medium for storytelling, but it is the video game that will inspire the game designers of tomorrow who will craft the game that will. Roger Ebert should have played Fallout New Vegas, but he was too busy being wrong about video games. Now he's too busy being dead. It's too late for Roger, but it's not too late for us. Fallout New Vegas also stands indebted to its past. It takes everything great about its isometric forebearers while leaving behind everything that kind of sucks about them, as well as taking everything that worked about Fallout 3 and molds itself into a paradigm of meticulously crafted narrative design greater than the sum of its parts. Or its bugs!
I got nothing to say to you. What's holding you up? Let's get this over with.
Everything present in Fallout New Vegas is in service to a greater creative vision and provides for players the exact experience its masterful designers intended with the tools that they had available. In this way, Fallout New Vegas becomes more than just some game with wonkily aged graphics or a gun that can melt dudes into goo. It becomes literature. This game is so ahead of its time, it will continue to be ahead of its time for the next century. This game is so good, it will serve as the paragon of narrative design for decades to come. This game will be taught in the college classes of the future. And if you're watching this far into the future, and Fallout New Vegas hasn't taken its rightful place in the pantheon of literature, then understand that you're in the bad future. If Fallout New Vegas isn't a household name by 2035, then we have failed as a species. God above created mankind specifically because he knew that one day we would make Fallout New Vegas, and then he would get to play it. God plays video games, everybody. God has played every single video game, including those weird hentai puzzle games on Steam, which he's disappointed by. He's disappointed that we make stuff like that, but all is forgiven because we made Fallout New Vegas. Basically, I'm saying that Fallout New Vegas is not only the Citizen Kane of video games, but it's also sort of the Jesus Christ of video games. It's a really good game, is what I'm saying. I think you should play it.
You're dead, punk. Watch out. Watch out.
But first, let's talk about video games themselves. As of writing this script in June of 2021, video games as a medium of holistic human expression have only existed for around 40 years. As the proverbial new kid on the block, they have been subjected to the very same kind of "is this the thing that is ruining the world?" brand of social hazing that even Elvis's hips couldn't escape. This frontier-esque nature of the video game medium presents a meaty challenge for the brains of concurrently existing game-liking individuals. People have been writing and thinking about books, films, and even opera for decades, centuries in some cases. Thereby, the popular conception of what a book or film even is, or how one should go about experiencing it properly, are both well documented and well integrated into the public consciousness. As a culture, we understand books, and we understand films. We understand how to like them. Video games, on the other hand, are in the Wild West in terms of popular thinking. We've all internalized through centuries and centuries of discourse of what makes a book good. We've all internalized through decades and decades of discourse about what makes a film good. But there is next to no agreed upon discourse for video games. We can't even agree on what a video game even is. We have not finished inventing the language with which to communicate our appreciation for video games. Nor can we teach other people how they could appreciate video games. It genuinely breaks my heart that there are a lot of people in the world who would love to play a game like Fallout New Vegas who never will because nobody's been able to explain to them why they would love it. People like my dad. Well, that ends today. This one's for you, my dad. And thanks for your significant contribution to my existence. I'm going to teach exactly you how to love Fallout New Vegas. So, let's talk about what video games are and how exactly one experiences a video game. Games were not created in a vacuum, they have influences, mainly films. Films were also not created in a vacuum. They have influences, namely books. Books were not created in a vacuum, they have influences, namely lived experience. Alfred Hitchcock is quoted as saying, "What is drama but life with the dull bits cut out?" Fun fact, I heard that quote for the first time when I researched drama in Sid Meier's Civilization 5. And maybe we'll talk about that game at some point in the future. This is a really good quote, and I think Mr. Hitchcock's brain was on the cusp of a thought of genius. Perhaps his brain would have been able to complete this genius if only he had lived long enough to play a video game. Well, allow me to complete his genius for him. Books are life, with the boring bits left out. Films craft their best moments in places where a book would merely summarize. And, to quote video game designer and critic Tim Rogers, quoting himself about Gears of War, video games create their best moments in places a film would edit out. So I guess Tim Rogers actually finished Alfred Hitchcock's thought. Neither of them needed me. I did put in that film part, though.
Can't grow crops if they don't give us the water.
From this simple outline, we can glimpse at a greater truth. What would make a real life bad makes a book good. What would make a book bad makes a film good. And what would make a film bad makes a video game good. You wouldn't want to actually have to walk an evil ring from your home in the Shire to the cracks of doom in real life. That would suck. You'd get stabbed a bunch. You'd get really tired. A bunch of your friends have to die. But the experience of reading about those things in a book is good. But if a book tried to describe in prose a long drawn-out fight sequence full of masterful camera work, meticulous choreography, and deeply meaningful action, it would be a long, arduous, boring book. But a film makes such things both compelling and interesting. And a film would not force you to spend 60 hours watching these fools literally just walk from one place to another, but a video game would. And it would make that walking deeply compelling. Hideo Kojima literally made a game about a dude walking stuff from one place to another, and it's deeply interesting. I wonder if we'll talk about that game in the future. Now imagine the inverse. Imagine a video game as a movie. Imagine Dark Souls as a movie. A 60-hour film about a dude or dudette walking around a big, hostile, doomed world getting repeatedly killed by monsters. Imagine watching a film and there's literally 16 scenes in a row of the main character getting killed by a spider lady, and then he kills her on the 17th go. That'd be a bad movie. You'd hate that movie. At most, a movie would just show a montage of the main character getting killed 6 or 7 times before he defeated the spider lady, and at best that would be viewed as comically silly. In a video game, not only do you have to hang out with the full duration of every spider lady murder attempt, but that's what you're there for. So what am I getting at? Well, the conceit of this video series project is to explain exactly why I personally decided to become an author, and provide people interested in my work with a The Lord of the Rings film trilogy appendices-esque experience looking into why I ultimately made the thing that I did. It's also an excuse for me to talk about things I love. I also hope to craft videos which teach people how they could love something, like, say, Fallout New Vegas, by guiding them through exactly why I love it. This whole thing is just my way of saying, Dad, I know for a fact that Mom is making you watch this, and I also know for a fact that you would love Fallout New Vegas if you would just take a little bit of time to learn how to play it. I also know for a fact that my dad would definitely side with the ultra-capitalist Mr. House because he's a Reagan baby who prefers fantasy to reality. We'll see what I think about Mr. House in a future segment. So anyway, let's arrive at some kind of thesis. I am proud to announce that no piece of media has compelled me to become an author more than Fallout New Vegas, for the following reason. And I've said all that wacky stuff about books and films and my dad just so I could make this point and have it make sense. So let's talk about verbs. You read a book, you watch a film, and you play a video game. Play is a fine word, but in cases with video game literature, it's too broad to be useful. So allow me to offer additional verbs, deeper verbs. You analyze a book. You analyze a film. And you author a video game. To play Fallout New Vegas is to author your own version of Fallout New Vegas, within certain parameters, of course. When discussing a book or film, say, with some buds on a podcast, one can only ever talk about the same text. Every person reads the same words in a book, or watches the same images flickering in the same order in a film. Interpretation and what you choose to focus on can differ wildly and produce vastly different fields of meaning, but everyone has access to the exact same text. However, no person experiences a game the exact same way, ever. Discussions of games like Fallout New Vegas must begin with the players comparing their experiences, with discussing the different versions of Fallout New Vegas which they have authored. Let me give you an example. You can think of Fallout New Vegas as a film where you, the player, get to create the main character. You decide their sex, their appearance, their physiology, which skills they've acquired up to this point in their life, and even some traits that are unique to them. You decide what they say and what their general disposition is. You decide who they kill and who they don't. Maybe you don't like the followers of the apocalypse, so the main character chooses to say mean things to them whenever possible. Maybe you want to know more about why Caesar is doing what he's doing, and thereby it becomes canon in your authored version of Fallout New Vegas that the main character is interested enough in Caesar's Legion to want to know more stuff about them. On a first playthrough, you will likely make yourself. Being yourself and knowing nothing about this world, you walk around the starting town asking the townsfolk about the world. You are, canonically, a freshly shot idiot, lost in a place you don't understand. You complete the game. You start a second playthrough. Maybe you make yourself again, or maybe you make somebody else. You pick different stats, you tag different skills. You decide to try out different weapons or different means of approaching a situation. You have just cast somebody else as the main character of Fallout New Vegas. With a full playthrough's worth of knowledge buried into your skull, you no longer need to ask the townsfolk of Good Springs, what's the NCR, or what's Caesar's Legion, or what's the Powder Gangers, or what's the Great Khans, like some kind of freshly shot idiot. You don't select these options because those aren't things this new character would say. Your new character is a person with lived experience in this world. Inadvertently, in your first playthrough, you have authored a freshly shot idiot, a person who is not from this place and does not come pre-equipped with any knowledge about who any of these people are. On your second playthrough, you are purposefully authoring a different character who, as a function of your own familiarity with the fiction, already knows at least some things about this world. In your first playthrough, you ask Caesar what his deal is because you don't know what his deal is, and thereby could use a prompted exposition villainous motive monologue. In your second playthrough, you already know what Caesar's deal is, so you don't need to ask him anything. You can still ask Caesar what his deal is if you think that's the sort of thing your character would be interested in knowing, or you could just sneak a gun in through your butt crack or something and you can blast Caesar right between the eyes, because you've decided that's the kind of thing that this character would do. In one version of Fallout New Vegas, Caesar is a guy who gets to monologue about his intentions, and maybe even gets you to work for him for a while before you decide that you like another faction better. Or maybe he even wins at the end. However, in another version of Fallout New Vegas, Caesar dies 2 seconds after he appears on screen because you just shot him with a gun that you smuggled in through your butt crack. And now he's dead for the rest of the story. And he never gets to ask you to blow up some robots for him or help him out with that brain tumor. Both versions of Caesar are canon. Both versions of Fallout New Vegas are canon. It all depends on what the player decides to author. As one of my college professors declared one day in his undergraduate beginner-level writing workshop, writing is rewriting. Now possessant of nearly a decade's worth of lived experience since that particular point, I can say with 100% honesty that I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. Writing is rewriting, and playing Fallout New Vegas is replaying Fallout New Vegas. Replaying Fallout New Vegas is rewriting Fallout New Vegas. In one's first playthrough, one is writing their first draft. Their first draft will be sloppy. Their first draft will have a lot of wasted space in it. Their first draft will have unintended consequences. When one sits down to play Fallout New Vegas for the first time, one is sitting down to compose their first draft. All they know is how and where the story must end. A player of Fallout New Vegas knows from the game's opening moments, or marketing materials, or from the words of friends that they must choose who ultimately wins the Second Battle of Hoover Dam. The NCR, Caesar's Legion, Mr. House, or the player themselves. Everything in the game leads up to this one choice. On a first playthrough, the player has not yet grasped the 41,000 article-sized Fallout wikis worth of minutia and nuance contained within this choice. On a second playthrough, one has. Or at least, one has gotten much closer to an author's understanding. On the first playthrough, one makes their choice. On a second playthrough, one understands the choice their character is making. On a first playthrough, that is your authored first draft of Fallout New Vegas, where you have almost certainly and perhaps even inadvertently cast yourself as the main character, you make the choices you would make, giving your limited understanding of the situation, just like in real life. On repeated playthroughs, that is your second draft, third draft, and so on, you understand the choices better. You know which choices will lead to what outcomes, either through your own experience or through the experience of others. One can simply browse the 41,000 articled Fallout wiki just to see how to get all of, say, Arcade Ganon's endings. You're no longer doing what you think you would do. You've already done that. Now, you're making choices based on what the character you've created would do. Like an author, you're not just a player anymore, you're the author. Let me explain what I mean further by citing my own experience. Back in 2010, during my first playthrough, I sided with the NCR. I sided with them even before I played the game and hung out with them. I sided with them because they reminded me of the United States, which is the country I fell out of a person into and still live at the time that I'm reading this script into a microphone. The United States, and anything which aesthetically resembled the United States, was what I was comfortable with. Interacting with another culture, even a fictional culture, and deciding that I liked that one better enough to turn on the faction which resembled the United States felt too much like pissing on the red, white, and blue. And more specifically, like pissing on my dear sweet grandfather's grave. My grandfather fought in World War II on behalf of the United States, and so I feel compelled to honor that legacy. And what better way to honor that legacy than to side with a proxy United States in a video game? Like, I was a dumb kid, I don't know what to tell you.
Are you stupid?
But as a result of this line of thinking, of this pre-choosing the NCR without actually seeing what they were like, it made my first draft of Fallout New Vegas sloppy. I didn't pay as much attention to the game as I should have. I didn't appreciate the other factions' perspectives as much as I could. I got a lot of bad endings. I got the Great Khan's bad ending when I murdered Papa Khan and installed Regis as the new leader, thus having the tribe side with the NCR. The NCR did not value the tribe's identity and soon subdued them. The game was rampant with thematic and textual hints that this was not the good choice.
An alliance? That's an interesting proposition. Any plan where I can throw packs of raiders at the enemy instead of my own soldiers is a good one. These tribals will make useful machete fodder. And if it should turn out we need their land later, well, it's not like we don't have the force to drive them out again.
But I didn't pay enough attention to the game, so I got a bad ending. I got one of Arcade's bad endings when I convinced him to fight with the remnants because I thought Enclave power armor was cool. This decision ended up both figuratively and literally destroying his life. I got the Brotherhood of Steel's bad ending because the guy I installed as the Brotherhood's elder, specifically because I didn't feel like doing any fetch quests for them, was not open to negotiation with the NCR and fully planned to engage in aggressive military action against them. So I blew them up, and in blowing them up, I got Veronica's bad ending because she didn't want to be my friend anymore. Which, in her defense, I had just blown up everyone she'd ever met. My failure to pay attention to the game ultimately led to a lot of undeserved suffering for a lot of people that I really liked. My first draft was a disaster. After this, I needed to play the game again. I needed to get it right this time. I needed to develop a deep appreciation for the game and its meticulously crafted, masterfully implemented thematic richness. Themes are the ultimate binding agent for any work of fiction. They are the guidelines which direct the user's experience. They guide us towards feeling an emotion, and, more importantly, a thesis. What writer Jack Grapes calls an emotional truth. Take, for example, the death of Boromir in The Lord of the Rings. Everything about this moment, from the motion of the camera, to the score, to the twisted mix of pain and determination on the character's face, to the anguish echoed in other characters, to everything that happens before this moment and everything that happens after. All of it invites us to be sad, to see the death as tragic, as ultimately undeserved. We are meant to feel the hopelessness of this character as he lies dying by a tree, only for that hopelessness to be ultimately dissipated by the words and actions of a friend. After all, Boromir did make the right choice in the end. Just like everyone else in this section of the Lord of the Rings fiction, he chose to have the courage to put himself at risk for a friend. Through meticulous filmmaking and powerful acting choices, the numerous crafters of this scene guide us into feeling the Lord of the Rings' emotional truth, the core argument of its soul. Be a good bud.
It's a riddle. What's the Elvish word for friend?
Melon.
With this gift of knowledge, one is primed to experience exactly what the film's crafters want you to experience in moments like this, or this, or this.
Here, something for the road.
Or this. Or this.
Let him go, you filth.
Or even this.
The beacons are minute! The beacons are lit!
Gun knuckles for 8. And Rohan will answer.
You know, now that I think about it, The Lord of the Rings pulls this particular trick a lot. Themes are the things which guide the audience towards a story's emotional truth, its thesis. One can judge the quality of a work of fiction based on how well it defines and utilizes its themes and thematic statements. If you asked me,
well, what makes Fallout New Vegas so special if games like Mass Effect, The Witcher, or even Obsidian's own Outer Worlds series will also allow players to make choices?
My answer would be threefold.
I'm a Witcher.
1. Fallout New Vegas has richer, more developed themes, which are baked expertly into every facet of its design. 2. Fallout New Vegas has tighter, smarter quest design. And 3. Fallout New Vegas makes it possible to fail. Let's put that first point on the back burner for now. I've made an entire separate video about that first point. let's instead focus on that second point, because if I'm going to claim that Fallout New Vegas has tighter, smarter quest design than any of its slicker, flashier, better graphicked, more theatrically bombastic competitors, then I'd better back that up. Let's start with the philosophical differences.
How do I put this basically enough? It's a philosophical theory, the kind you might encounter if you took time to read some books.
In, say, Mass Effect or the Witcher series, you, the player, are not the author. You're more of an actor playing a role, which occasionally gets to raise their hand and ask the real authors to do something for you. When Mass Effect or The Witcher's real authors decide to allow you to make a choice in their story, they incur more work for themselves. What do I mean? Well, the most meaningful decision one can make in the Mass Effect trilogy is which one of your buds becomes a set of bones by story's end. For example, the starkest choice in Mass Effect 1 is deciding which one of your human buddies will collapse into the afterworld and which one will get to stick around for 2 more games. Because of this, the true authors of Mass Effect must author 2 versions of Mass Effect, one where Ashley lives and one where Kaidan lives. It would be an inhuman amount of work to have these 2 versions of Mass Effect be meaningfully different, so its makers don't bother. The Ashley Lives version of Mass Effect is only superficially different than the Kaidan Lives version. They both do exactly the same thing, they assume the exact same rules. With every other potential bud death, there's a suspiciously similar substitute hidden somewhere in the story world. If you decide to kill Rex, he's merely replaced with the worst version of Rex. Store brand Rex, if you will. If you decide to kill Mordin, you must hang out with store brand Mordin. In fact, you can spot which Mass Effect characters are ultimately superfluous to the story based on the ones that don't get replaced. The most obvious example is Jacob, who has literally less than nothing to do in Mass Effect 3, so you might as well kill him in Mass Effect 2. A perhaps more controversial example is the fan favorite Garrus, whom I've affectionately nicknamed Gary Bear because he's also my favorite. My best boy Garrus literally has nothing to do in Mass Effect 3. Kill him off in Mass Effect 2 and no B-Team Turian nobody appears to take on his role in the story. This is because he has no role in the story. This is the chiefest of Mass Effect 3's many crimes. So what makes Fallout New Vegas different? And what makes this difference better? Well, simply put, Fallout New Vegas wisely absolves itself of this particular problem. First of all, as I've already discussed, you, the player, are the author. You're the author the entire time that you spend in Fallout New Vegas, instead of just some of the time like you do in Mass Effect. As for the second part, well, consider the following. Mass Effect gives you the choice of ends, conferring more work upon the series' true authors. Work they can never finish, so they have to cheat. Fallout New Vegas always has the same ends, so the player's choices are instead a choice of means. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at one of Fallout New Vegas' meatiest main quests, Ring-a-Ding-Ding, in which the player finally confronts their rival and attempted murderer person, Benny.
What in the goddamn?
A lot of stuff can happen in this quest, but it always has the same end.
You sick, vindictive fuck!
Benny departs from the story, and the player character acquires the platinum chip. However, the player has several paths they can take to reach this absolute end state. Upon reaching the strip, the player may choose to talk to Mr. House beforehand or choose not to. When suited narcs declare their intent to relieve you of your weapons, you can refuse and start a fight right then and there, or you can accept this limitation and search for alternative sources of weapons. When confronting Benny, you can just walk right up to him,
What in the goddamn?
or talk to his right-hand man Swank and try to convince him of Benny's villainy. Depending on what evidence you've gathered and your speech skill, Swank can allow you to carry guns in the casino, circumventing the earlier obstacle, as well as allowing you to raid Benny's bedroom. You can even convince Swank to just let you kill Benny right then and there, removing him from the story and reclaiming the platinum chip. Otherwise, you'll meet Yes Man and can bring this up to Benny when you confront him. If you do confront Benny, you can either foolishly believe him when he says he'll meet you up in the suite, convince him to come up to the suite right then and there, or if you have the Black Widow perk, you can convince him that you want to have sex a little bit, and you're hopelessly attracted to people who attempt to murder you.
Nice Charlies, too. Give him a shake for the Ben man, will you?
And if you choose this option, you can just kill Benny in his sleep after a little bit of sex time, or don't, in which case he leaves you a precious little note and flees to the fort. If you go up to the suite without Benny, he will flee to the fort, and his mooks will ambush you. If you go up to the suite with Benny, you can chat him up about his master plans, then either kill him then and there or let him walk away. If you kill him, you'll get the platinum chip just before his mooks ambush you. If you let him walk, he'll flee to the fort and his mooks will ambush you. Should Benny survive your encounter in Vegas, he will be captured by Caesar's Legion at the fort. There, after completing a quest that you were going to go do anyway, you get the platinum chip, and then get to decide how Benny exits the story, either by murder, arena murder, crucifixion murder,
You sick, vindictive fuck!
or by letting him escape.
Like I said, baby, all Benny needs is a stealth boy and a bobby pin.
In other words, Fallout New Vegas offers you the choice of means. It is from these means that you author your version of your main character and ultimately your Fallout New Vegas. How you would approach confronting Benny in Vegas says a lot about your character.
What in the goddamn?
A hot-headed character would charge in foolishly and watch impotently as Benny fled the city.
Point of my inviting you to visit me here at the Lucky 38 before stomping into the tops on your own was to help you prepare tactically.
A sneaky, conniving character would talk to Benny adjacents in hopes of getting the drop on the weasel. Even when confronting the captured Benny, one is given 4 options with which one authors the vindictiveness of their character.
You sick, vindictive fuck!
And this design philosophy, when massaged texturally into every facet of Fallout New Vegas' quest design, reaps such spiritually satisfying wonders that no amount of Mass Effect's impressive cutscenes or cinematic score can hope to reach. Fallout New Vegas' genius is in its choice of how, not in what, by giving you the choice of how Benny exits the story and how the player acquires the platinum chip. The designers of Fallout New Vegas give you several means with which to craft your character. Now we arrive at that third point. Fallout New Vegas lets you fail. It lets you destroy the lives of not only your friends, but entire groups of people. Fallout New Vegas lets you kill anybody. Fallout New Vegas lets you fail just about every quest. In games like Mass Effect or the Witcher series, it isn't really possible to fail per se, it's only possible to obtain suboptimal solutions. Mass Effect in particular suffers from this inability to allow the player to fail. You can behave wildly monstrously at several points in the story, and the actual consequences are minimal. You can gas an alien species into extinction, and your more diplomatic companions will still hang out with you. You can badmouth Cerberus at every possible moment and do everything in your power to undermine their goals, and Miranda and Jacob will just go along with it. The Elusive Man will just go along with it. You can bring Legion onto a Quarian ship, and they won't kill him. In Mass Effect, the narrative bends itself over backwards in a lot of twisted ways in order to keep the player from just massively messing everything up. In Mass Effect, preserving the player's status as escapist superperson takes priority over making consistent thematic statements. Mass Effect is so committed to the idea of never violating the player's positive power fantasy that it never lets itself really be about anything. Well, I just spoiled my whole Mass Effect video, so I guess I don't have to make that now. Fallout New Vegas, by contrast, lets you mess up whatever you want. It lets you suffer the consequences. Oh, you shot some NPC for no reason? Well, the quest they're part of fails, and you don't get to do that quest now. Oh, you convinced your sexy doctor friend to join the Enclave after walking around the wasteland hearing about how everyone hates them?
But they did bad things. Terrorize communities, kidnap people.
Well, now everyone hates him, and his life is destroyed. Good job, buddy.
Saddened by the loss of life and liberty in the area, Arcade left the Mojave Wasteland for parts unknown. He was never heard from again.
Oh, you brought a clearly extremist, militant, uncompromising faction leader, a guy so uncompromising that he presents being uncompromising as a selling point, And you brought that guy into power just because it'd be quicker than doing a couple of fetch quests for the clearly more even-tempered leader. And now he won't negotiate with you. So you just have to kill the whole faction. You spent all that time getting to know that faction and getting them to trust you, and now you have to kill him. Boone hates the Legion, and he'll stop being your friend if you help them.
If there's one thing I won't tolerate, it's working with some dog of the Legion.
Arcade will refuse to join you if you're friendly with the Legion in any capacity.
Why don't you make like Odysseus and get lost?
Cass will leave you if you're evil. Veronica will leave you if you kill the Brotherhood. Mass Effect never lets you screw up that bad. Mass Effect never lets you be so human-centric and undiplomatic that friggin' nobody shows up to help you in the Reaper War and just everyone dies. Mass Effect never lets you be such a prick that one of your party members just flat out refuses to be in your party anymore and just leaves. Yeah, you can gas a bug race into extinction, and you can betray the Krogan into extinction, and you can shoot your scientist lizard friend, or backstab your robot friend, or backstab your cute suit friend, but all of these are just suboptimal solutions. They're not a failure to obtain a moral victory. In other words, one of the things that makes Fallout New Vegas better than Mass Effect, better than The Witcher,
I'm a Witcher,
better than The Outer Worlds, is because it decisively and intentionally allows you to not learn your lesson. Fallout New Vegas will admittedly never let you lose the second battle of Hoover Dam, but it does allow you to fail. It allows for your victory to be Pyrrhic, for the cost to be too great, or for your victory to make things materially worse for most people. Fallout New Vegas is willing to deny you the power of fantasy, or at the very least portray your fantasy power as a bad thing that can have terrible impact on many good people's lives. And with this capacity for failure, this willingness to forsake the self-aggrandizing power fantasy, it makes all the choices in Fallout New Vegas much more compelling, because they have real consequences. It allows the game to express its themes with confidence. It allows the game to make stronger, more profound thematic statements. It allows the game to criticize players who do not engage with its thematic statements. It allows the player to author more compelling drama. Once the player understands the themes of the game, themes which its designers massaged effortlessly into every aspect of its design, the player can author deeply interesting works of fiction. One of the deepest themes, one of the themes most woven into the very spiritual fabric of Fallout New Vegas is one's relationship with the past. Every major faction models itself off of some society long past. Every minor faction is in a deep, reflective state over their past and on the precipice of choosing whether to change or whether not to change. Every companion has a past which haunts them in some way. Every place in the world feels entrenched in history. Even you, the player, are pulled into this profound pastness through your initial prime motivation of tracking down Benny for what he did to you, and then eventually later in Lonesome Road. We can garner a peek under Fallout New Vegas' thematic hood when we analyze its companions and their personal quests. Every companion's quest is ultimately homoousian, that is, of the same stuff. The companion has a problem which has arisen out of the particularities of their past, and once that problem is resolved, the quest ends and the companion's ultimate fate is sealed. Each companion essentially has a good ending where they prosper and a bad ending where they suffer disaster. Now, the game's tone does flavor these good or bad endings and makes them feel a little bit more than that, but the choice is still essentially binary. What's interesting is how one goes about achieving a good or bad companion ending. Let me show you what I mean by tracing these axiomatic lines for you. 1, every companion quest is ultimately about the same thing. That companion's past brings them into crisis. Then, 2, at the climactic moment of each companion's quest, the player is presented with a binary choice on how to resolve that crisis. Either A, helping the companion find a way to make peace with and or overcome the past, or at least move on from it, or B, encouraging that companion to allow their past to consume and or control them. Then, 3, if the player authors the companion to find a way to move on from the past, that companion prospers. They get a relatively good ending.
Though his regrets remained in his thoughts, they coalesced into a purpose, and Boone embraced it.
However, if the player authors that companion to ultimately be consumed by their past, then that companion suffers disaster. They get a relatively bad ending.
No longer held in check by his conscience, Boone found lucrative work as a mercenary and assassin. No job was too violent, no target too innocent.
To peruse each companion's available endings is to interact with a mosaic of good and bad. In Veronica's quest, for example, the binary choice is whether she stays or leaves the Brotherhood of Steel. The ending in which she stays is decisively more melancholic than the one in which she leaves. In Arcade Ganon's quest, the binary choice is whether or not Arcade feels obligated to join the Enclave, which his father served, or strike out on his own and forge his own destiny. Almost every single ending where Arcade joins the Enclave ends in tragedy.
He was never heard from again.
While almost every single ending in which Arcade builds his own life end hopefully.
Though he found that independence for New Vegas was not all he hoped it would be, Arcade did his best to help the locals govern themselves.
There are, of course, complications. For example, none of Raoul's endings are particularly negative, while none of Lily's are particularly positive. But the pattern holds. To be consumed by the past is bad, while using it as a jumping-off point towards a better future is good. Even with Raoul and Lily, both of whom admittedly feel unfinished when compared to other companions, we do see tendrils of this thematic richness. The closest thing to a bad ending Raoul gets is if you don't do his quest at all. But if you do, then your choice is more how Raoul resolves his past instead of whether he does or not. And as for Lily, well, Lily's not that interesting. Lily sucks. I almost never recruit Lily. Lily gets cut from all my authored versions of Fallout New Vegas. You're boring, Lily. I don't know what else to tell you. But anyway, through these examples, we get a tangible handle on one of the author's greatest tools. Every author must, as a function of narrative, decide which characters, or in Fallout New Vegas' case, societies, prosper and which suffer disaster. From this necessity emerges opportunity. From this idiosyncratic function of narrative storytelling, the author can gift the audience the means to craft meaning. The author can design a simple argument in the form of which characters prosper and which suffer disaster. Characters who learn, say, a moral lesson prosper, while characters who fail to learn the lesson suffer disaster. However, prospering and suffering disaster don't necessarily mean life or death, victory or defeat, or anything like that. For example, in The Lord of the Rings, Boromir, Theoden, Denethor, and Gollum all die. However, both Boromir and Theoden learn the moral lesson, that is, be a good bud. Denethor and Gollum do not learn this lesson. Denethor and Gollum do not learn to be good buds. Boromir and Theoden's deaths are heroic, noble, and tragically beautiful. They both die with hope in their hearts and in the presence of someone who loves them. Denethor and Gollum's deaths are nasty, ignoble, and probably hurt a lot. They are both literally and figuratively consumed by fire. Prosperity, suffering, disaster. With that framework in place, we can feel the lessons Fallout New Vegas wants us to learn and which endings lead to prospering, albeit appropriately imperfect prospering.
There, they reconnected with the followers of the apocalypse and rebuilt their strength.
And which ones lead to disaster.
The NCR's pressing need to expand proved greater than its promise of amnesty. And before long, the government decided the cons had to go.
Through this lens, we can see the ultimate message. Fallout New Vegas is not, and never should be, a story about good and evil. That's why your karma meter doesn't matter. Instead, Fallout New Vegas is about the people who learn from, come to terms with, and overcome the past.
Sometimes I tell myself that these wildfires never stop burning. But I'm the one who starts them.
And people who don't.
Losers don't matter in the history books.
We see the fruits of this axiom when we apply it to the game's major factions. One of the things that makes them so deeply interesting, especially when compared to some other games we could mention, and maybe make whole videos talking about some later point in the future, is their deep thematic parallelism. The NCR, Caesar's Legion, and Mr. House are all competing for the same goal, to secure both the power of and power over Hoover Dam, and thus by extension the entire New Vegas region. And what's more is that each major faction is engaged in the same project, They're reviving a pre-war culture and incorporating local tribal societies into that project. Thereby, the choice between these three factions is not a choice of kind, as the choice in, say, Fallout 4 is.
I've had word from a settlement asking for help.
Rather, it's a choice of methods. The NCR, Caesar's Legion, and Mr. House are all engaged in the same socio-political project, constructing a society deeply influenced by a pre-existing one, forming armies, enticing followers and supporters, and ultimately competing for the same goal. Herein lies Fallout New Vegas' greatest trick, its greatest design decision, the thing that makes its ultimate choice so interesting. It doesn't allow its world to fully learn its lesson.
Always, true to Kaiser.
The lesson Fallout New Vegas tries so adamantly to enforce is, don't let the past eat you up. Instead, use it as a staging area for a better future. Old world blues into new world hope, if you will.
Great! Psychology! Clearly the worst of the sciences, right after colostodiuretics.
As we have seen in companion quests and in minor faction quests, choosing to overcome the past rather than be consumed by it is how one gifts to oneself a prosperous ending. And yet, none of the 4 endgame choices are quite choosing to overcome the past. The world stage can never achieve that virtue. There is no good ending in Fallout New Vegas. There's no ending where everything works out. Not even the independent ending. I see you thinking about writing that comment in the comment section that's all,
what about the independent ending, dude? That's gotta be the best one.
No, it's not.
And I'm not just saying that because I have to.
There is no best ending. The society you decide to author as victorious in the Second Battle of Hoover Dam never learns its lesson within the confines of the story. So, the ultimate choice in Fallout New Vegas is not a choice between good and bad endings. It's not even really a choice about learning the lesson or not. Rather, to choose one of the 4 endings is instead to choose how much we learn the lesson and how much hope there is that we'll finish learning the lesson in the future. So then, which faction should you pick? How do you pick when there's no correct choice? What should you do when forced to choose the lesser of 4 evils? Well, we'll get into that when we talk about the factions and the DLCs in part 2. But in the meantime, I have been and continue to be Zachary Cush, and you just learned all about why I love Fallout New Vegas, and why it doomed me to become an author.
Can't grow crops if they don't give us the water.